Hi, Chris.
Hi, Philip.
Really good to have you on the podcast. If you can tell us a bit more about yourself in terms of your current role and how you got to where you are today.
How far back do you want me to go? I left school with no qualifications at all. I became a glazier and a glass cutter. And then eventually decided that I wanted more than just glass cutting as part of my life. Did A levels at North Notts College, and went from there. I did my degree in law, but eventually went down the side of postgrad PGCE. Became a teacher flitting between Calderdale and Rochdale. So I went from a very leafy lane school in Calderdale to a tough inner city school in Rochdale, then back to Calderdale and then back to Rochdale. But eventually came here in 2007 as deputy head of this school. Um, then went to my first headship, and then came back here in April 2014, where I've been head ever since.
Okay. So, what made you interested in getting into teaching in the first place?
I think it's one of the things that it's what you know. So my mum was a teacher. I wanted to be a barrister. I got my law degree, but at the time, the only place to do your bar finals was down in London, which meant that I would have to borrow a large amount of money for the fees, as well as a large amount of money for living expenses. And whilst I'm sure students today would think, "Oh, that's nothing," it put the frighteners on me, and therefore I steered away from becoming a barrister for that reason, really. And with my mum becoming a teacher, I went down the road of what did I know, what was in my life already, and that was where I started to think about doing the PGCE.
Okay. So, before we get into more to do with like your philosophy, how would you describe the kind of school this is?
I always kind of describe it, and I might be a little bit flippant, but do you know the film Mrs. Peregrine's Home for Wayward Boys and Girls? That's how I would like Ramsden to be seen. I don't know if that it is, but yeah, we have a very kind of serious outlook about what we want success to be, but we also have that kind of very serious outlook of it being open for each and every child. So there's that kind of dual look at yes, we want success, but every child, as the old saying says, every child matters.
But what does success actually mean?
Well, it means both. We know that we live in a positivist world where exam results uh, mean everything, and if we weren't getting the correct exam results, then I'm sure Ofsted would come and make changes that would make us not able to do what we do. So we know that we have to tick that box just to enable us to do what we do in the other aspect of it. So, for example, in the mornings we have 8 teachers across 4 classes to do the English and the maths. Now, I know that there is the accusation that in some schools they narrow the curriculum to achieve the results because there's pressure on schools to get certain results. We do it by increasing the amount of teachers there so that we can keep English and maths in the mornings so that we can spend the rest of the afternoons for all the other parts of the curriculum, the sport, the arts, you name it, everything else. Because our philosophy is that side of the curriculum is just as important as the English and the maths. Don't get me wrong. I know that the English and the maths children need to be able to learn to read. They need to have those qualifications, but they also need to learn about what themselves are, what is inside them, and what makes Freddie Freddie as opposed to Jenny Jenny, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
that's the
But
philosophy.
how is this school different? in your view compared to other schools?
Because I think we take just the Ramsden line. We develop a curriculum based on our locality, based on our own individual grounds. We've got a woodland, so therefore that makes a big impact in our curriculum development. We have a situation where a lot of our children come from very deprived backgrounds. So if you looked at our Educare profile, it's quite amazing. We have quite a significant chunk from the top Educare profile, the richest part of the Educare profile, and then nothing in the middle. And then we have a significant chunk either in the fourth or the fifth quintile. So we literally have the richest to the very poor with nothing in between. So we develop our curriculum to manage those extremes as well.
Yeah. So what is the curriculum like? If you had to kind of give an overview of, like, you know, what do the kids get to do?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of sporting, there's a lot of arts, there's a lot of gardening, there's a lot of animal kind of thing, there's a lot of local history, but there is also a lot of kind of things where the children are learning about their own mental health, learning about what I like to call Biesta's three domains of education, where you have that kind of the socialization, the qualification, but also, as Biesta calls it, subjectification, where the children learn themselves to be part of society. And I think, you know, as opposed to a lot of social media now, which develops a kind of strong individual personality. So I'm sitting at this part of the desk and you're sitting at that part of the desk, and I've got very strongly held views and you've got very strongly held views, and there's this gap between us. Well, we like to teach the children about what Biesta would have called subjectification, whereby, okay, so I've got my views, you've got your views, where is it that we're going to meet in the middle? And I think that that's not what happens in the world today. It's everybody opposing each other and not trying to find that middle ground. So that's something that we teach the children a lot at Ramsden.
So what is your philosophy of education then? So, you know, you talk about Biesta, so obviously, like, that's something that I'm sensing that it's underpinning a lot of you know, the decisions that you make, and you know, the reason why things are the way they are. So what is driving that vision that you have when it comes to, you know, the way that you want this school to be what it is?
I think if we go back to my very early roots, I was brought up on a colliery estate, Easington Colliery, where Billy Elliot was filmed. And therefore that colliery background obviously has stayed with me a lot. A kind of very traditional left-wing values, although I'm not what you would call a typical left-wing. I'm not that kind of person, but I do hold those kind of values of everybody being treated with the same, given the same opportunities. And therefore, you know, although I would say that I would have a critical pedagogy stance with Henri Giroux, Michael Apple, I would say that technically I would have that, but my main focus, I think, that is from a critical pedagogy kind of thing, is everybody having the equal amount of chance as anybody else. And that's the philosophy that I personally have and that I've tried to drive through with Ramsden. So it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what your background is, your chances in life should be exactly the same. And of course, they're never going to be from a starting position. You know, the people that come from, you know, different backgrounds are not going to start. This whole idea of we're all starting at the same starting line of life is completely untrue. So whatever we can do to make that starting line more equitable is what we will try to do. Which is why.
And how do you do that?
In this we by inviting the children in from 3 weeks old and seeing what is available to them, showing the parents what is available to them, and giving those children the opportunities right from that very early age of that belief within themselves, of thinking that I can do this. You know, going back to the 2015 evidence from the Roundtrees Foundation, most people wanted their children to go to university. Most people had high aspirations, but not enough people knew how to get there, knew how to follow that yellow brick road, if you like, to put all those milestones of success into place. And therefore, although they had the ambition, they didn't know how to achieve it. And therefore, right from a very early age, if you like, we try to show them how they can achieve that success.
And how does that more specifically influence the pedagogical approaches that that are used within the school?
Because everything is based on an individual basis. So what we would do is, although it sounds as if I'm going onto a tangent, we have an inset week rather than 5 inset days. And we did that so that we could give parents that opportunity to have a cheaper holiday, because we knew that was affecting attendance. So we've done that since 2016, I think. But that wasn't kind of too far out there. But what we do is we give back that time on a Wednesday afternoon, and it makes our staff meetings a lot longer. Now, in year 3, 4, year 5, 6, and in Key Stage 1, we split the children up into very, very small groups, so that we have the 8 teachers across the 4 classes. The teachers therefore know the children very, very well. On a Wednesday afternoon, instead of a normal staff meeting, we split off into groups, and therefore the teachers can discuss each individual child to an in-depth level of what they need, not just for English and maths, but what they need in a socio-economic kind of situation, what they need as a mental health kind of situation. Everything about that child is discussed, about how we can develop that child right throughout the curriculum. And therefore, we have a lot of teachers who have an input into that child's life and can also discuss it with each other to make sure that everything that happens within that child's life is benefiting it.
So what's the cost of that approach? So everything has opportunities, has opportunity cost, or everything is that kind of give and take. What is the cost to actually have that approach of focusing on the individuals at that level?
Well, if you like, if the opportunity cost in a lot of other schools where, I don't want to make the accusation of narrowing the curriculum, but we all know that there are figures out there that show how certain other subjects have declined because of the increase of maths and English, in order to have that pressure to get the results. And therefore, the narrowing of the curriculum is an opportunity cost, isn't it? That the narrowing of the curriculum is what you have to pay for to get the results if you're going to just concentrate on English and maths. So there was an opportunity cost, and I knew that. So of course, instead of having 4 teachers across 4 classes, what I've done is invested in more teachers, so that we can keep the time element of the afternoon available for all the other subjects. So literally, when you're talking about opportunity cost, it literally is an increase in cost financially to the school, because we've paid for 8 teachers rather than taking the time to extend English and maths that way. We've just extended the numbers of people doing it.
To what extent do you feel like that has been worth it, from some kind of more visible sort of metrics, if you like?
Interestingly, the Education Endowment Fund make a thing where they say that reducing class sizes don't work, and they also say setting and streaming don't work. Now we've gone against both of those things, which I suppose is quite controversial. But if you look at the reasons why they set out why they don't work, is that setting and streaming normally means that what happens is the teaching assistant ends up teaching the lower ability children. So you have 5 or 6 children that are lower ability, you go off with the teaching assistant, and therefore the teaching assistant, with great respect to them, has the lowest level of teaching experience. That the children that need the greatest level of experience, they're not getting a good enough deal. Now, in that sense, we make sure that our English coordinator teaches English and just English. She's the most experienced English person. So she will teach English across year 3, 4, 5, and 6 to make sure that the children that are most in need of that extra help gets the most experienced teacher. We also do exactly the same with the maths lead, the maths coordinator. She teaches across year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6. So the children that need the most help get the most experienced teacher. And then the rest of the children are divided, and they're divided into groups of numbers so that we still focus on very, very low numbers for children who need that extra help. We also have low numbers for children who have the ability to excel. And then the children that are in the middle, they are probably in higher groups. But of course, the other thing is that because of those extra staff meeting time that we have on the Wednesday, those groups are very, very dynamic. So children that might be in one particular group for certain subjects like fractions, they might not have that additional need during perimeter and area. So those groups will be very, very dynamic. And the teachers are able to have that kind of discussion themselves, and that agency and autonomy to say, right, this person's in this group this week, but next week they might be in a different group. But it's all to do with teacher knowledge, teacher expertise, and having that ability to know each and every child within the school.
How did you end up doing, taking that approach? Is it something that kind of developed quite organically through, sort of experimentation, trying different things, or, was this something that you kind of knew this is like what would work and therefore implemented?
It was one of those things where I think if you remember when Michael Gove was talking about private schools, and he was basically said something along the lines of the cloisters of Eton to the corridors of power, and they run seamlessly. And it just got me thinking that, well, of course they're going to be successful. They not only do they have the parental background where they want their children to succeed and know how to get that success, as scholars such as Diane Ray always used to say, that they know how to achieve that success. So they've got that kind of ability right from the start. But they also have class sizes of 15, 16, 17. So I was thinking, well, what can we do to kind of replicate that kind of teaching ability and that teaching environment that the children can have, and that was how we had a look at what we could do.
What is leadership to you, if I'm moving on to something that's a bit more specific from that angle?
When I first became a leader, I knew that it wasn't my job to be the best at everything. It wasn't my job to be the best SEN coordinator, or the best at this, or the best at that, or the best at the other. My job was to coordinate all the different people that were already the best at something. And therefore, that, I think, is what my leadership is. Valuing you for what you are good at, and then saying, right, Philip, you're brilliant at this. I need this. Can you come and help me out with this? And having that kind of trust and respect for the skills of everybody within the school, I think, is what leadership is about. And in that sense, I always think to myself, I've been really, really lucky. I've been really lucky with the people that I've got, the school business manager, the school accountant, but also the teachers that I've got who are dedicated within themselves, want to achieve everything. And it's all about coordinating that, rather than, if you like, telling people what to do. That that's not what leadership is.
But how would they describe you? If I was to ask them, how would you describe Chris as a leader?
I always talk about the situation where my philosophy is that I tell people where there's the mountain, and we've got to get to the top of the mountain. But how you do it, it's up to you. Where I think that other schools or the leaders are very, very kind of dogmatic, and you do it this way, you do it that way, you do it that way. And I'm not one of those, because I would very much dislike somebody telling me exactly how to work, and I knew that wouldn't be good for me. So I kind of transferred that kind of thing of how would I want to be treated, into making sure that I treated other people to do it. Not everybody works in the same way. Not everybody has the same life, not life chances, but life, what's the right word to say? Not everybody's life at home is the same. Somebody might be young, living with the parents. Somebody might have just had a child 3 weeks ago. Somebody might be in a later stage of life, and therefore every ability is different. So the idea that, you know, I need to leave school at 4 o'clock because I've got a child to pick up. Okay, so they do their work when the child's put to bed. Somebody works until 6 o'clock at school because they don't have to have any commitments at home. So it's allowing everybody to have that kind of difference of working style and working. I mean, we can't be as flexible as some jobs, but giving that flexibility as much as possible.
So agency clearly is really important to you, right?
Absolutely. Agency.
But with that agency, how do you know that person's going to be able to get to that top of the mountain?
Because I like to think that we are all working together, so that if anybody is struggling to get to the top of the mountain, there is that, and I keep saying it, don't worry about struggling. If you are struggling, you don't have to come to me, but go to somebody and just find out, look, I'm struggling with this bit. Can you help me with this? So one of the things that we had two newly qualified teachers, one coming from your university, and one who's more or less just finishing. So we set up a situation where the one just finishing could be a hub for the two new ones, as an unofficial kind of thing. So we've got the official mentor who will have to go through the ECT program, but that ability for the other two people to go up to the one who's just gone through it. I'm not sure about this. What am I doing about that? What am I doing about this? I'm not sure. And have that kind of safe space where they can offload unofficially as well as officially, and just have that ability of saying, look, you know, I might struggle with this bit, or what do I do here? What do I do there? Just that we're all a team. Let's get to the mountain together. And if we need help, that there's not a problem with that.
But how do you get the best out of people though? So like, you know, obviously with the sort of less experienced staff, you can kind of put mentoring in place, you can support them through that sort of you know, scaffolding approach, if you like. But then when it comes to, for example, people who are more experienced, who've got you know, who've been at school for a long time, for example, how do you make sure that they feel like you value them, and so that you can actually get the best out of people?
The most experienced people,
yes,
because I include them more in a wider variety of not necessarily senior leadership team meetings, but I express the fact that I value them through their kind of input to school leadership, school decisions. So they will be very much more on the front foot of the direction of plans, rather than being told a direction of plan. So the literacy coordinator or the English coordinator, I've still not got over the literacy and numeracy hour. So the English coordinator and the maths coordinator will very much have a control over the direction that the school will go, and that's the kind of distributed leadership that I want. So we won't have a kind of like a deputy head that will tell the English coordinator or the maths coordinator. In one sense, the maths coordinator is second in command from me when it comes to maths.
Right.
In English, the English coordinator again is second in command to me when it comes to English. So they have that capability and that and the ability to drive the school forward in how they think within an umbrella, if you know what I mean. We do have the staff meetings that basically have that. We do things under a critical pedagogy way of working, and everybody learns that kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
So as long as it's within that kind of philosophy.
That's what I was going to ask, really, because I was thinking, do you ever find yourself having very different vision, for example, compared to, you know, those people who are working as a subject expert, for example, in terms of what they're thinking that they want to aim towards, and if you do find yourself in that situation, what do you do then?
We have that kind of discussion. I'm famous or infamous for me analogies. If you ask members of staff about Mr. Wilson, they'll say he's always got an analogy. So we talk about things such as that, and or I'll talk about I'll bring football into it, and there was a big kind of thing about the Premier League. And we had a staff meeting the other day, not last Wednesday, the Wednesday before, all about the Premier League and about the fact that the top 6 in the Premier League are the 6 teams that are in the last 8 or the last 16 of the Champions League. And what happens is, and this might be a little bit boring for some people, but the fact that they've taken FA Cup replays away, the fact that the teams that play in the European competitions don't start in the League Cup until the 4th round. My view is that enables the same teams to become part of the top 6 year in, year out. And therefore, that's the similar kind of thing of what critical pedagogy is all about. It's making sure that the same things don't repeat year after year after year after year. It's spreading that ability, spreading that opportunity. Now, the Premier League is very, very successful. Nobody can deny that the Premier League is successful, but it's if that's what you want. If you want to repeat the same thing over and over and over again, the Premier League's absolutely fantastic at that. But as a school, that's not what we're about. So let's not look at that. Let's not look at the business model of going back to things that we were talking about before with Stephen Ball. Let's not look at that, because that's what that reinforces.
So what would you say are the most important ingredients when it comes to effective leadership, however you define effectiveness?
Making sure that every child has got the opportunity to succeed. And obviously I won't name names, but there was one child who, that by the time that this child had got to year 3, they were working at a year 1 level. Now, I remember in the old days when it was the literacy and the numeracy hour, and there was literacy and numeracy booster groups, and those booster groups were for children that were level 3A to get them to the 4C, because the level 4 at that time was the magic number. So it was getting these level 3A children to level 4C. Well, this child would have been forgotten about. She's too low, let's go, leave her behind. Well, that child got an aggregate score, an overall score of 99. Therefore, she was 1 score low for getting the 100 that is required to get the required standard. Now, that child's life chances, even though she didn't get it, she was only 1 off, but that child's life chances are much higher now. She's going to be able to access more of the curriculum in secondary school, and therefore she's going to be better off because of what we've done throughout the 7 years that we got in making sure that no child is left behind. Not just children who are not going to be able to catch up, because we proved that you almost did. So it's that kind of philosophy of never giving up on any child.
Do you have the same philosophy when it comes to leading staff at your school?
Yeah, we like to think that. Obviously, there is. What can you say? There's a high dropout rate with teaching, and that is because it's hard work. And it's the same for Ramsden. You're going to have that philosophy to be what we call a Ramsdonian. Whether you're children and staff are Ramsdonian, and we all want to have that kind of philosophy, and we all want to have that kind of care, and therefore we do have that kind of demand where it's not just a job. If your job is just to earn the money so that you can spend it at a weekend to do what you enjoy, that's not going to work, because we need everybody to have that kind of passion where we have that kind of, we have a saying at Ramsden, your kids are our kids. And it has to be that I will treat your child, as a parent of a child that comes to Ramsden, I will treat that child as if that child was mine. And everything that I would want a teacher to do with my child, I have to do with that child. And that's the philosophy that we demand of everybody that works in the school. It can't just be that job. You know, everybody, I don't know of anybody within the school who doesn't have a child. And therefore, what you've got to think is, you imagine being able to follow your child through that day in that child's school life. How would you react if you thought that your child wasn't getting the best of everything? You would react negatively, and therefore you've got to therefore put the same level of effort that you would demand of somebody else for your child. And therefore that kind of thing of your kids are our kids is a very important philosophy for us.
Do they come with that philosophy already when they first start at the school, or is this something that they develop because of, like, you know, the kind of ethos that you have?
It's one of those things where hopefully they come with that because of the intrinsic values that teachers have. Teachers come from universities with that intrinsic value of wanting to teach and wanting to make children's lives better. So, you know, hopefully they've already come with that as a kernel of that's available to grow, and we just develop that from there more and more and more. You know, the other thing is what Dewey said: what the wisest parent wants for their child, so should the state want for every child. And that, again, that's just a posher way of saying, you know, hashtag your kids are our kids. You know, what I want for my child, everybody else should want for every child.
But how do you develop that way of thinking if they don't come with that necessarily? If they don't have that intrinsic motivation, you know, when they arrive at the school, but you can see that there's potential that, you know, they can really offer a lot to the school. What do you do to get that out of them?
Yeah, we all the experienced teachers then work with those, not just, it's not just a work with them, it's a whole kind of philosophy. It's bringing that person into a way of life, if you know what I mean. And I know it sounds as if it's a little bit strange, if you know what I mean, that, you know, Ramsden's this kind of, I don't know, Stepford Wives Club kind of thing, you know, but it is that kind of, what's the right word to say, an ethos. It's very difficult to do that, but we make sure that all the staff that have been here for a long time take that person under the wing, because in one sense that newly qualified teacher is just like another child, isn't it? So what I would want for like the older people, they would have children that go to university. So, you know, like Catherine, her children are 18. What they would want people to treat their children as an 18-year-old when they first going into employment, well, that's how we should be treating that 18-year-old or 22-year-old or whatever it is coming into employment. And the other thing is that we do is any child that has been to Ramsden, it always comes back to do their work experience, always comes back to do kind of thing. If they were in a university, they could do a teaching practice or whatever here. They've always got the opportunity. So we're always kind of trying to develop that link with people. We're always trying to develop that kind of viewpoint that how would I want my child, whether that child is 5, 18, 22, how would I want a person that I'm related to be treated? And therefore that's how we've got to treat somebody else coming into the school.
How do you use communication as a tool to, you know, sort of make sure that culture is sustainable?
Communication in
terms of, like, how do you communicate with staff, and how do they communicate with each other so that ethos is so clear, so that, you know, they can really get that philosophy within themselves, and so they can actually help you to get to the vision that you have. So how do you do that?
I think that one of the good things about having a lot of staff, if you know what I mean, the idea of 8 teachers across 4 classes, is that fact that because there is a lot of staff here, there is that more social kind of environment. And that's developed right from day one. We bring in people to have that kind of social aspect of it. We'll, it's Friday, we'll all go to the chippy together, and it's all of that, bringing that kind of aspect to it. Yeah, we've got our electronic systems, seesaw and emails and all of that kind of thing, but that's businessification, if you like. We've got to have it on a more kind of personal level as well, and it's bringing those people in right from an early kind of career into having that kind of social aspect, ability to talk, the trust to say, I'm struggling, can I have that help? It's all part of that same kind of aspect of drawing people in, making sure that people can trust you, feel comfortable with you, and encourage people to develop, and having that ability to say, look, there's the mountain, it's up to you how you climb it, but even though I'm going to mentor you, I'm mentoring you in a way of, I would climb it this way, but I know that you still might climb it a different way. But these are some of the tools that you might need to climb it in your way. And having that kind of ability to see how different people work, I think is a real strength for the different people that we've got. And therefore, because we've got so many different people, there are so many different people that people feel comfortable to go to.
But how do you actually build that trust between, say, yourself and the other staff?
I don't know. It's a difficult kind of thing to say, because it's one of those where if you ask the staff, they will say that it's there, and I think it's something that has to be done over a long time. I don't think that you could actually say to anybody, right, if I was retiring in a couple of years, to the new person, right, this is what you've got to do, this is what you've got to do, and this is what you've got to do. I don't think that would work. It's coming in with that ability to learn and have the respect. I think that's an important kind of thing. It depends on what you want to do, isn't it? If you want to have an organic Ramsden within I always say within that certain umbrella, then you allow people to flourish, and you take on those flourishing individuals as part of and parcel of and encourage it. But if you want to come in and say, this is how I want Ramsden to be, and you create the umbrella, then you end up losing that kind of trust. So you can't tell people how to develop a trusting relationship. I think it's just a way that you do it over time. And I think that was something that I must have had when I was deputy, because part of the recruitment process for the headship was asking the staff who they wanted to come back, or who they wanted as head, and they wanted me to come back rather than the other people that had applied for the job. So it was obviously something that I'd got right when I was deputy, but I've got to say, I find it difficult to say exactly what it was.
Yeah. Okay, well, could you tell me a little bit about your PhD research? Really interested in the research that you undertook and the findings, and in what way? I think that is probably the more important question, is in what way did it actually inform your practice and the school, in terms of the impact that it already has had, or whether it's something that you're currently still implementing some of the sort of strategies that, based on the findings that you had, so that you can try to use what you've learned to actually make the school even better.
Yeah, I think it would, again, it's one of those things where there's a saying that you can't see the wood for the trees. I think sometimes you have to be able to zoom out, and you can see something clearly, but when you focus further and further and further in, it becomes a little bit more difficult to actually identify all the different things, which is why I say, how do you develop trust? And it's hard to say what that one particular thing is, or whatever it is. And during the research, I was struggling to think, well, what is it that I'm going to say about what's different about Ramsden, and what is it that? And then I heard Ridian Brooke on Thought for the Day. I always listen to Thought for the Day when I drive into work, and I think it must have been the first day back after the summer holidays, and he was talking about education because his wife's a teacher, and he was saying that how education, the word education, comes from two root words: educare, to mould, and educere, to lead out. And he was talking about all the different things, and I thought that was it. That was the exact point, and that was how I want Ramsden to be, and that was how. Thankfully, that was early in my PhD research, and that gave me the opportunity of saying that's exactly what Ramsden is. We all have to do the English and maths and things like that I loosely termed as educare. We have to mould the children into a certain kind of thing. But the other aspect of education is to lead out. What is individual about you? And therefore, what can we celebrate about you? What can we make you feel good about yourself? And what can we make you feel that you could be a success for yourself and to the world?
Yeah.
And that educare, that lead out, from that point came a massive aspect of my research throughout that. And I suppose that is part of going back to what you're talking about, trust, is again, it's that leading out, not telling somebody what to do, but lead out what they're good at. Give those people that confidence to think, do you know something? I can do this, and I've got the ability to do this. And Mr. Wilson's given me the ability to do this. I can lead Ramsden on music. I can lead Ramsden on English, and therefore that educare and educare, whether it's child-centered or adult-centered, is something that was a huge thing throughout the school, and that was the way that we developed. So it was therefore, how do we develop educare rather than, yeah, we know how we do the mould, but how do we develop educare? And it was therefore asking a lot of people, going through the interview process, and there was interviewing governors, teachers, teaching assistants, parents, children, and I did it on a hermeneutic process, so that I did one round of interviews with all the parents, the teachers, the children, the governors, listened to what they said was important, how they thought education and child-led education should be. So we started putting all of these kind of things into practice, and then 18 months later I did exactly the same round again and said, so you said this, we did this, what's your viewpoint on how are we developing, where could we go further? And it was just that hermeneutic process of forever thinking, right, okay, you said this, we'll try and do that, what's the next thing? And therefore, as a result of it being a hermeneutic process, it'll never be finished, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It'll always have that kind of cycle of what else can we do, because of course every generation is new. Every reception class that we get every year is different to the previous one. So we're forever developing what that research about educare actually is.
But based on your philosophy, is that is the idea of to mold the children, and as well as to lead out whatever's in them, is that the optimum sort of way of approaching say teaching learning within the school, or is it a pragmatic thing where ideally it would all be about leading out from the children, or is that molding is that necessary, or is it just something because it is there that you've got to take that into account?
I think going back to that, there is an easy kind of thing of just hitting out against governmental things of requiring standards, and I think going back to those kind of viewpoints, yes, it's easy to hit out at numbers, 80% have got to get this, or 86% have got to get that. You've got to get above national expectation. That is not welcome. But of course, the children have to be able to read. They have to be able to have a level of success in English and maths. And that's not just a governmental requirement, that's a life requirement. It's our obligation to make sure that children can read and write and everything, not just allow them to be complete free spirits. We've got to give them that kind of moulding. And I think therefore it is pragmatic in the fact that we recognise we've got to make sure that these children can read, can write, can do the arithmetic in the old-fashioned 3 hours kind of thing by the time that they leave primary school. Otherwise, they're going to get left behind. We know that. So there is that kind of pragmatic view of that.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is therefore, it's that demand where, as opposed to where Apple and Giraud would say the education is about replacing the workforce. Our philosophy is, okay, we as a country, as a society, we've got to do. That's what a society is. You've got to replace and you've got to succeed. Otherwise, society would reject anything that wouldn't kind of be successful for the society. So we understand that, but what we want is for instead of somebody saying, right, okay, in a functionalist society where, right, we need this, Philip, so that's what you're going to be. We want to say, right, no, Philip, what do you want to be? So society's got to succeed, but so does Philip. And Philip has the right to say, I should fit into society, but this is how I want to fit into society. And that's what our pragmatic view of education is.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it sounds to me that there are two things at play here. One is the structure, which I think is what you're talking about in terms of the mold, molding the children to be, what they need to be, that kind of thing, which obviously are structures that are established within a society through different forces, and then you're equally valuing the importance of agency.
Yes, that's I don't use the word enough, but again, it's with the staff, it's with the children, and I think we talked about compliance, and that is the thing that I will always fight against, the demand for compliance, because I would always fight against that personally. So that possibly comes across to other teachers within the school and with children. You don't be compliant. You've got to do what you want to do, not at the expense of anybody else. Going back to Biesta's subjectification, it's not about me trampling over somebody else, but about me saying, I want to do that, and as long as it doesn't hurt you, I've got the right to do that. And of course, there is a fine balance there, but it's not just being told what to do. This is your role in life. No, it isn't. I can choose my role in life, and that's what we teach the children here. You can choose your role in life.
But how do you address the kind of tensions that you would get between different people wanting different things that would kind of have negative impact on somebody else's agency, that sort of thing?
This is the kind of thing that we were talking about with our ELSA, emotional literacy support assistant. That's the name that she has, but as opposed to most of the schools, she doesn't just get a Friday afternoon. She has that freedom to develop all the different things, and that is to make sure that we have that kind of, as Biesta was talking about, the subjectification as part of our curriculum. So it is the ability of having that. We all know where the wedge issues are in society, and we can talk about those wedge issues in school. But instead of discussing them as wedge issues, we try to teach the children about, well, how can we see each other's viewpoint in a different way? And how you get those sideways diagrams about results and things. This is what we say about these wedge issues, and we'll discuss them and say, well, where would you meet in this point? And it might be over here. Where would you meet at this point? And it might be. and you get a series of points of view and saying, well, in actual fact, you're not that far away from each other. Even though you think that you disagree, you're not that far away from each other. And it's that ability of getting the children to know that being able to live in the world and do what you want to do has to be alongside somebody else and what they want to do as well, without the conflict.
Yeah. So as a school, because what you're talking about here reminds me, sort of at the wider macro level as well, in terms of how the school sits within the system of education. There's structure in place to mould schools into what they are. Equally, schools have agency to sort of, work in a particular way to be who they want to be as an identity. So how do you navigate the school within the context that we're in currently, with the kind of climate of policy and the direction of travel?
It's a very difficult situation. So I recognise, as I think I've said before, that we have to get a certain level of tick boxes in the Ofsted test, if you like. And that is the be all and end all of my kind of desire within the moulding of schools. So whenever anything comes out from the government, if it's an English paper or if it's a maths paper or something like that, and that person goes on training, or if anybody goes on any kind of training, everybody knows, yeah, okay, have a look at it. Where does it fit the Ramsden model, but where does it not? And everybody knows that we don't have to take something as the whole thing. We take what we think is right for the children and what is right for Ramsden, but not if we don't think it's right for all of the children. So, for example, a few years ago, Ofsted said that you had to have a phonics screening, a specific phonics screening provider, and we rebelled against that. We were lucky enough to have the fact that our phonics results were high enough that we were allowed to rebel against that. But we rebelled against that on principle, because people were saying that one of the phonics schemes relied on teachers being able to, or teachers having to do their own lesson plans. And I thought, can you imagine that 20 years ago, saying that something wasn't good enough because it relied on teachers to do their own lesson plans? How insulting is that? So there is that kind of thing that comes from governments where they are constantly trying to tell you not just what to teach, but how to teach. And that's something that we will always say when we're not having that. So there is that kind of thing where we know that we've got to tick the Ofsted tick box exercise, but we are professionals. We are what we think are doing a good job. And yes, we've got the curriculum that we have to teach, but we also develop our own curriculum. And it is important to keep that professionalism whereby you're not taught or told how to do your job, because that damages the intrinsic value that teachers have in order to do the job. And that's possibly why you have people wanting to leave, because they're losing, or they're having that intrinsic value taken away from them. The idea that I want to make a difference in children's lives, and then somebody says, yeah, but you've got to do this lesson plan and you've got to do that lesson plan, and then you've got to follow it with that. That's removing that kind of agency as you're talking about, as well as that intrinsic value.
But what, in terms of sort of thinking at that macro level, what would you like to see, which would help you to think that the direction of travel is kind of like the right one in the sort of foreseeable future?
Are we talking about after the new Labour government?
Yeah.
My viewpoint is that we are in a situation that is still under a Conservative banner, if you like, because I don't think a great deal has changed in education since that general election, and we've been waiting for a Labour kind of stamp on what education is. It's very unlikely that Labour will row back on the number of multi-academy trusts. I think the horse has bolted there, and it would be very difficult to row back on that. I would hope that the structure of the multi-academy trust would change. On a political level, I'm against things such as term time only contracts. I think that those are akin to 0-hour contracts. That's on a political level. On a pragmatic level, what happens is that reduces the wages of teaching assistants to that where working in Tesco's is just as attractive, because it reduces the wages of what teaching assistants have to make them term time only. And I think that has got rid of a lot of fantastic teaching assistants that made a huge positive difference to schools. And therefore I would like to see a redistribution of wealth, which means that those at the top of the pyramid don't get as much of the money, and a lot of the money is then gone back down to teachers' wages, teaching assistants' wages, money for the curriculum. I would hope that is something that would happen under the next few years of the Labour government. And I would also hope of an appreciation of teachers, that they know the children that are in their care, that they know their job, and that they are treated professionally because they know their job, rather than constantly be told this is how to do your job. They've studied a long time to do the job, and they should be given the recognition of the qualifications that they've studied for, and be able to be given the agency and the freedom to do that task.
That's great. Well, thank you, Chris. Been fascinating talking to you about this. I do have one final question for you. What do you want to see when it comes to this school? So we've talked about the macro level, what do you want education to be like, in the foreseeable future, but what can you tell me in the next, say, few months, what's exciting about, what's going to happen in the school? What would you like happening
over the next few months?
Yes.
Well, we've just bought a bus. We bought a 1962 Leyland, can't remember, but it looks like the one that Cliff Richard was on in the film Summer Holiday. So it's a big red bus with the stairs that go up the back, and we are converting that into a library. So we had the idea, because of the Harry Potter kind of night bus, to have that old-fashioned looking bus, and we every so often it's good to relaunch things like reading, and that's what we've done. We've bought the bus to convert into a library. So that is the plan for the next few months.
Great. So finally, if you can give one message to all of the educators out there in one sentence, what would it be?
Educare and Educere.